In the third aliyah of Parsha's Kedoshim, we learn about the mitzvah of Orlah. The mitzvah of Orlah is, as the Torah prescribes, when the Jews will enter Eretz Yisrael and they're going to plant a tree, for the first 3 years of the tree's life, they should be blocked from eating its fruit. Orlah means to be blocked. They should not eat the fruits of the tree for the first 3 years. After 3 years, they could begin eating the fruits of this tree. Now, in Mishnayos, there is Mishnahs that give details about this mitzvah. The tractate in Mishnayos is called Tractate Orlah, obviously about the mitzvah of Orlah. And over there, in one of the first Mishnahs, the 6th Mishnah precisely, it mentions an interesting halacha, which is, let's say you have a whole orchard of fruits, and you know one of these trees, one of your many trees are Orlah. It's a tree that's younger than 3 years old. And the rest of them are all kosher and fine. You could permissibly eat their fruits according to halacha. And you're not sure which of those trees, you have, let's say, 500 apple trees. One of those apple trees is within 3 years and you're not allowed to eat its fruits. So then the Mishnah says, as long as when you pluck the fruits, as long as the Orlah fruit is outnumbered by the permissible fruit by 201, then you could eat the whole batch. The Orlah fruit becomes nullified. It becomes batul b'roiv. It becomes nullified in the 201 permissible fruits, and therefore you could eat all 202. All original 201 kosher fruits, and the one unknown Orlah fruit that you know is in this batch as well. Now the commentaries point out on this Mishnah, it doesn't say that while they're on the tree, it's nullified. It says that if you have 500 trees, 200, 300 trees of fruits, and one of them you don't know if it's Orlah, when you pluck the fruits off, the Orlah becomes nullified in the permissible fruits. Why doesn't it say that even when I walk to my orchard, I know I have one tree in 500 that is Orlah, and I have 499 permissible trees, that it's batul. It's been nullified and I could eat from all 500 of these trees. And the commentaries explain because that it's based on a principle, mechuber einay batul, something that is connected to the ground, connected to its roots, cannot become nullified. The Orlah fruit can only become permitted and nullified in the other fruits when it's taken off of the tree, when it's plucked from its source. However, as long as it's connected to its source, it doesn't become nullified, and you could have 500, 1,000 kosher fruits, permissible fruits to eat. That one Orlah fruit remains untouchable and unedible until it becomes plucked, and only then does it become nullified. Now, the Rebbe has a very timely parallel in life and a life lesson that we could take towards to the time we find ourselves in, which is a Jew could wonder that we're surrounded by so many people that aren't like us. We're surrounded by so many nations that are not Jewish. We're surrounded by so many antisemites. And it seems like the number of those that are against us or resist us are more than those that are for us. We are we are the least among the nations. We are a tiny nation in the world's population. And therefore we'd say, halachically, how can we not assimilate? Or how can those that are against us not overpower us? Or how can we not just melt into the culture of the world? How can Jews not melt into the culture of America if the halacha is something that is minuscule becomes nullified in a pot of something that has much more than it? We are a small number in the pot of the rest of the world. We should be batul. We should be batul in the amount of relative to the nations and just become one of them. Or if we have that many enemies against us and we are less than them in number, then how do we know that they're not going to overpower us? What should we do to make sure they don't overpower us? And the lesson we can learn from this Mishnah is mechuber einay batul. Something can only become nullified when it's disconnected from its source. But if we Jews remain attached to Hashem, then we cannot become batul. And when we hear all the noise of the world around us, and anti-Semitism raising its ugly head, we could either try to make our voices try to be louder than their voices, and they have big rallies, and we should try to have big rallies, and those things are obviously important, but at the end of the day, they are more and they are louder, and we are smaller relative to the whole world. In America, it seems like the Roiv are still for us, but relative to the rest of the world, there's so many of those that resist or just aren't allies of the Jewish people. And it seems like there's so few is. So yes, we need to strengthen ourselves in number, but where we really need to go to is back to our source. Strengthening our connection to Torah, strengthening our connection to mitzvahs, strengthening our connection to Hashem, and mechuber einay batul. When a Jew is attached to Hashem, and all Jews are attached to Hashem, whether they consciously know it or not. But the more I strengthen and consciously deepen my connection to God, then we're not nullified. And it mathematically makes sense. If we have 500 times non-Jews to a small number of Jews, it seems like we're nullified. But if a Jew is attached, plugged into the electricity of infinity, plugged into Ein Sof, then we're just a manifestation of Ein Sof, of infinity. And it looks like we're 1 relative to 500, but we're really infinity relative to 500. Because we're plugged into more than ourselves. We're plugged into the infinite. And obviously we don't become nullified because infinity is bigger than 500. Well, Jews are plugged into Hashem, we are Hashem's people, and the more we attach ourselves to Hashem, we could have many, many, many people against us. We could be nullified in more than, we could be within numbers of more than 200 to 1. But mechubar ene batel, something that is attached does not become nullified, and that's where our main focus should go, of course, along with all the other diplomatic means that we need to carry out. This parallels with a very similar story. There was a couple that moved out on shlichus to help a Jewish community somewhere in mid-America where there was not a big Jewish infrastructure. And the wife at some point started questioning, what are we doing over here? Let's just move back to a frum community. She gave her husband a parable, a mashal. She said that if you have a small kettle of hot water and you throw it into a big icy swimming pool, a cold pool in the middle of the winter, so fine, it will start warming up the surrounding area of the pool a little bit. The water is going to get a bit warmer, but eventually all the cold water will outdo this little kettle, and it will just cool the whole thing off. So how are we going to not only not get affected by our surroundings, we're convincing ourselves that we're going to affect the whole city around us? It will look nice in the beginning, but eventually all the coldness of the abundant coldness and apathy towards Judaism will outweigh our little kettle of us, one couple that moved to the city. And her husband gave her a powerful answer and said, when will the kettle be overpowered by the pool water? As long as it's not plugged in to the source of heat. But if the kettle's still plugged in, aside for the getting electrocuted part of the story, if a kettle's still plugged into the electricity, to the source of heat, then no matter how much cold water around it, eventually, yes, the kettle will overpower and take over the cold water of the cold water surrounding it. This is a general way to live life for a Jew, to not be nispal from his surroundings. And even if it seems that people around are cold and apathetic, when we're attached to Hashem, we work on our hiskashrus and our connection to Hashem, our connection to the Rebbe, our connection to Chassidus and Torah, and these sources, these reservoirs are infinite. And when we attach ourselves to the infinite reservoirs, then we overcome no matter how many numbers. Numbers pale in the face of infinity. And when a Jew is attached to infinity, he becomes a walking manifestation of infinity. And no one can overpower him, both in living spiritually a Torah life, and even the voices of those that seem to stand against the Jewish people. Historically, it's proven that when we stand authentic with our Judaism, we prevail, and we cannot become nullified because mechubar ein batel. Have a great Shabbos.